Alright guys, what's going on? So today's video is pretty important. In the last one, I might have hurt this thing, so today we're actually going to dive into it a little bit more and I'm going to explain everything that happened with the truck's motor and actually what we're going to do to fix it. And an absolutely massive announcement, we actually have a new merch drop. We have a new t-shirt design. It's an F100's tee. You guys have been asking this for absolutely ever. So after the video, go down in the description, click the link and make sure to grab one of those for yourself. We're doing a week-long pre-order. I have no idea when I'll make these again. We're trying our best to be able to get these things to you before Christmas. So definitely go grab yourself one of those. They are on the website now. On top of that, we are doing a Black Friday sale. Everything on the website that's old stock will be 25% off. That's right, every single thing on the website that's not the new shirt design will be 25% off. All the old merchandise that we've had on the website. I think I have some Saudi stickers that I found, so I'll throw those up as well. And basically, site-wide it'll be 25% off, and then we just dropped our brand new t-shirt, which you'll be able to grab. So make sure right after the video, go to 99speedcompany.com, grab yourself some merchandise. You guys are not gonna wanna miss this sale and this drop. And don't forget to like this video if you enjoy, subscribe if you are new. Let's get into what actually happened on this thing. Alright, let's dive into this a little bit. So, if you don't remember, about, I don't know, last upload 3-4 days ago, I posted a video doing the Black Widow exhaust on this, which sounds absolutely insane, mind you. If you haven't seen that video, you definitely need to watch it before you watch this one. It won't make any sense. I'll click the tag up in this corner right here. Go ahead and watch that video. It's an amazing video of me absolutely beating the snot out of this thing and checking out our new exhaust. So dive into that before you watch this one. So for those of you guys who don't know, this F100 has a high compression 302 that I built for it. Believe it or not, it actually has a stock crank and stock rod still in it. It has a Keith Black 2.6cc dome piston in it. There's a comp 280H cam in it, 512 lift, 110 LSA. I can't remember what it's at 50, but it's a 280 duration advertised. This thing has a set of CNC ported. This thing has a set of 185 CNC ported Renegade AFR heads on it, as well as their port match single plane intake. It's got long tubes and then the custom Black Widow exhaust that we built, and it sounds absolutely insane. And on top of that, it has a quick feel carburetor, but this thing has a quick feel 600 on it, which was fine. You know, driving around, I've driven this thing with this carburetor. I've probably put, you know, 10-15,000 miles on this truck, beating the crap out of it with this exact carburetor on it. It has not been an issue. Because mind you, stock 3-inch stroke, it's not a stroker. It doesn't flow a crazy amount of air. Well, at least with the exhaust that I had on it. So the one point that I made that was very big in the exhaust video was the massive V baffle that was inside of the Flowmaster muffler that I was changing out for the Black Widow, which was a through muffler. You could see straight through it. Well, it's a very important thing when it comes to tuning and airflow, because the air that comes in the motor must go out. So if you have a big restriction going out, it won't pull as much air in. Well, naturally, when I increased the outflow, the inflow increased, which is something I should have thought about, but I didn't. And because I did not have an AFR gauge, which I pointed out in the video as well, that just made it even more so I wouldn't realize it. So naturally, because there is more air coming in the engine and going out, naturally you would want to increase the amount of fuel going into the engine as well. That was something that I completely disregarded. I just thought of the exhaust. I didn't think about the flow rate. It's not something I just knew and didn't address. I just totally spaced out, didn't forget about it. You know, you fire the thing up, it sounds absolutely insane. You just want to do nothing more than go drive it around. That's what we did. And I'm not one to do halfway pulls. You guys know this by now. Fast forward a little bit, we're running pretty much the exact same setup that we always have with this truck. I can't remember the jet size off the top of my head. So we're running the same jet, same carburetor, same motor setup that we have. Mind you, the motor has around 1,200 miles on it. It's plenty broke in. We've probably ran it up past 100 miles an hour 20 times, up into fourth gear at 6,000 plus RPM many times. This is not the first time it's seen a rip like that. Because there's plenty of people that say, oh, you know, it wasn't broken, you started with oil, you did this, you did that. No, it's fine. It's seen that RPM many times already. It was not an issue. But naturally, because we increased the airflow out and didn't increase the fuel flow in, it was naturally running lean the second we put the exhaust on it. That was something I didn't think about. All right, so let's dive in a little bit to what actually happened here. So analyzing the video, which I've watched literally 150 plus times at this point, not only because it sounds really good and all you guys are reposting it. If you haven't checked out my Instagram, make sure to do so. I posted all the angles that I have of it, as well as the photos and everything going with it. Make sure to check that out for yourself. But looking at the video, the exterior shot, the flyby, the one of me coming around the corner is the most important shot of the video for multiple reasons. You can analyze it and slow it down frame by frame and kind of see what's going on. Not only the first run coming towards the camera, but the second one, which is the one everyone likes, where I come around the corner and you can see the trail of smoke. That's the one it actually broke on. So I drop Garrett off the film, I go down the street at a low RPM, which you guys can see, and I get to the end and turn my in-car camera on, make that U-turn, and I pretty much let it eat right out of the gate. So first gear, smash the limiter, grab second, dump the clutch, it spins through second, grab third, and I'm on my way. It's running perfectly fine. You know, I'm watching oil pressure gauge, I'm watching some of the gauges, but so around to get into fourth gear, I'm about halfway through fourth gear. I think I was at about 5,055, 5,200 RPM. And that piece of paper like flips up in my cab and I try to grab it and then it flies out the window and I missed it. So I lift, so it was fine. You know, not a big deal. I downshift a couple times. It looked like there might have been a little bit of smoke out of the exhaust, which is probably its first lean condition, but it wasn't enough to hurt anything, so it wasn't a big deal. Nothing was hot enough yet. The issue was when I came to that stoplight, you know, I downshifted a bunch. It was sitting there for all of maybe 3 seconds at the light. I flip a U-turn and I do it again. That was where the issue starts, for sure. So I flip the U-turn, I'm excited, I'm not really looking at anything, paying attention to anything. All I know is it runs really good, and Garrett's on the other end of this thing with a camera waiting for me. So I make a U-turn, I see somebody that's giving me a thumbs up. I was gonna wait a little longer to hit it so I can get, you know, a 3/4 shift right past the camera. Well, when everyone's watching, you give you a thumbs up and you're about to hit it anyways. Foot through the floor, first gear, second gear, third gear. I'm coming around the corner, and right when I hit the straightaway, I hit fourth. You can hear it and you can see the smoke coming behind the truck as I'm coming around that corner. Now that smoke is 1000% the piston melting itself down. So naturally, because we've already established that there was a lean condition initially, which isn't an issue until you get wide open throttle and up in the RPM range. You know, prior to that, you could drive it around just fine. There wasn't any issues. It's running fine. But because we're doing 2 wide open first through fourth gear RPM rips back to back, you know, fuel pressure may not have been all there. The jet size, I think, definitely was a few sizes too small. Because at the end of the day, a little 600, even if you jet it really big, acts nothing more than a restrictor plate because it can't flow the air. You could fill that thing up to a crazy amount to where it would flood this thing, but the airflow would simply be restricted. So the carburetor size was not the issue here. I rev it out to about 6,600 in third gear, grab fourth, and then I spin it up to about 55, 5,600, and it starts cutting out and breaking up pretty bad. So I naturally lift because I feel like something's wrong, and the thing just basically drops straight to an idle, and it sounds like it's running on 5 cylinders. So I tried revving it a couple times, it backfires, and that's why I'm like, oh, I blew it up. That's when I initially realized I broke this thing. And not only that, the entire time that I'm realizing like, hey, I just rod knocked this thing, I could hear a thud in the bottom end. Naturally, when you just rev it to almost 7,000 RPM and it backfires, my first intention was I spun a bearing and I just rod knocked it. Which makes 0 sense because I just built this thing, I know the specs on it, and they were all perfect. So I was like, maybe it lost oil pressure at the top end and just leaned it at the bottom end out and spun a bearing. A lot of you guys guessed that. But luckily, that was not the problem. So this thing actually was down a cylinder. At the top of fourth gear, what had happened is it leaned out so hard in one cylinder that the cylinder pressure and temperature was so much, it actually started to melt the piston apart. And the electrode on the spark plug shut itself completely, and parts of molten aluminum were coming off of the piston, hitting the plug and going out the exhaust. So that's that smoke that you see, is not only a little bit of oil coming past the ring, but it's also parts of molten piston going out the exhaust, which is just great to know. And because of this cylinder temperature and actually it leaning out like that, the electrode on the plug literally shut. You can see it right here. I have it in my hand, and you can see right there, there is 0 gap on this plug. So it completely shut the gap. I did not touch that. I pulled it out and it looked like that. I was running a 45 thou gap in this thing. That's typically what you should run with a electronic ignition setup, which is what I have. So the backfire and the running like crap and the knocking was actually pinging and detonating because, well, it wasn't firing on one cylinder. So I limp it back to my house, immediately pull the plugs out. I find that and I'm like, what the hell is going on? Why did that happen? So doing my own bits of research, I found out that that was a lean condition. Now I'm obviously wondering, why did it go lean? Lo and behold, the exhaust, you know, a free flowing setup now, it's 1000% why it went lean. So we've established the motor went lean. So the plug gap shut, but what actually broke? So like I was saying, when it got so hot, so I have a hyper-eutectic aluminum piston in this thing. It's not a stock piston, it's not a forged piston. So because it got so hot, and it's kind of a budget piston, if it was a forged piston, I might have been okay. But because it was a just regular hyper-eutectic piston, those don't take nitrous or any sort of crazy heat very well. So it naturally broke a corner of the piston off or melted into multiple pieces and shot that corner out the exhaust. And that's what I found out later when I stuck a borescope in this thing. Now I'll overlay that clip because it's very important to run through this. I initially saw the top of the piston. I could see like maybe a couple little nicks here and there, but nothing too crazy. I was like, okay, this thing's fine. It just needs a spark plug. You know, I've seen in plenty of forums that I was reading, people leaning the motor out and it shuts the electrode on the spark plug. They throw a new plug in it, they're good to go. Which was all fine and dandy until I got to the last part of when I was done with the borescope and I rolled it over just a little bit, and in the corner I saw like the sharp edge. Well, the way the cylinder is set up in the head, that it's kind of hard to get a borescope down in this corner. So I'd rolled it over just to where I could see it, and immediately I saw I was missing part of the piston, and that was where it all went downhill. So the way the spark travels in the cylinder, it goes outward, it hits the center and goes out, and then kind of loops around. And the sharpest edge of the piston is right where the two valve reliefs end on the corners on the outside. So it got really hot, and that's the weakest point of the piston, so that's the part that decided to break first, chipped off the corner of the top of the piston, probably melted it into multiple pieces, shot molten aluminum onto the plug, and then shot that piece out the exhaust, or probably multiple pieces. Now naturally you would think the head is junk, but it's not. I don't think there's anything wrong with the head. We might have nicked a valve, and we might have mushroomed a valve from the immense amount of heat, but I think these AFRs definitely stand up to this kind of stuff. So I think if anything, when we pull this thing apart, we might have a couple little nicks on the valve itself. I just have to put a new intake, new exhaust valve in it, we'll be good to go. But that begs the question, so does it still run? Is it completely broken? Well, let me show you. So naturally, I wanted to see what was actually wrong with it. I wanted to make sure the head was okay. So the top of the ring, as you can see in the photos, is perfectly fine. The only thing that is actually missing is that top corner of the piston. So naturally I wanted to throw another plug in it, gap it, and actually see if it still ran. If it ran poorly at that point, which I know is still making compression and sealing because the ring's good, that's where I would know I damaged the head. Well, let me show you. That's it detonating in one cylinder. So you can hear the detonation on the piston in this cylinder. So naturally you can hear that thud in the cylinder. It sounds like a piston slap. Well, obviously it's got a piston slap if the top corner of the piston's missing, so it can rock around a little more. But you can see it's running perfectly fine, makes perfect oil pressure, doesn't smoke, doesn't do anything weird. It's running, essentially if the piston was there, it'd be fine. So in reality, the grand scheme of things, I did break a piston, and the only thing I should have to replace is just one piston, theoretically. So I think the bore is fine. We might just bore that cylinder and check that cylinder. It should be fine. I don't think it scored it up too bad. You can see in the photos and videos, the cylinder still looks perfect. And the only running I've done is to actually really just show you guys just now, you know, the 20 seconds it's been running is really the only thing it's done since it broke. So I don't think anything's crazy damaged. I'm just gonna pull this thing out, pull it apart. But the downside is if you've ever built a motor, the pistons, when they send you them in a set, they come balanced their own weight. They're balanced as a set. So if you want to order just one piston, they ask for the gram weight, because when you build the whole thing, you get the whole thing balanced. Well, each piston and each rod is balanced to the rotating assembly. So if I was just to buy one random piston, throw it on a rod, throw it back in the motor, everything's gonna be out of whack. So I have to pull this thing all the way apart, take every piston off every rod, take the gram weight of every piston with and without the wrist pin in it, give that weight to Keith Black, they send me a new piston. Then I can put the whole thing together, balance it one more time just to check, throw it back together, and we'll be good. So the good thing is I didn't actually like destroy the motor, but if I was to keep driving it like this, it would obviously break that piston more and it would destroy the whole cylinder and ruin the block, which is obviously not something I want. So unfortunately, yes, the motor has to come out, has to come all the way apart. Luckily I can leave like the front drive and stuff on, but realistically if I pulled it apart on a Friday, I had the measurement to Keith Black by a Monday, I could have this thing back together and in the truck the following Friday. I don't see why that would be an issue, because the turnaround date for a piston was about 2-3 days. But you have to keep in mind, I've built this motor now 3 times, and I've been told a million times by a million people that I'm doing things wrong, I should just let a professional do it, this, that, and the other. And the thing I'll tell constantly to everybody watching this is the only way you learn a thing in this world is by doing it. You will fail a million times before you get good at something, and that's fine. I was told that I was driving it way too hard, that I'm spinning this thing too high. This cam makes peak power at 6,200 RPM. I shifted at 64. That's normal. I'm not over driving this thing at all. It has the valve train to spin 7,500 plus, easily. And the bottom end is just a very simple 3-inch stroke balanced lightweight rotating assembly. It has a lightweight flywheel on it, it has a fluid damper balancer on it, it has a light set of pistons on it, and the stock crank and rods will go 7,500 RPM if you do it safely. So there's been plenty of stock 302s that have been rev past 7,000. This is nothing new. Another assumption is that I had the oiling issue. This thing has a Melling 68 high volume pump in it. It was seeing 55 pounds of oil pressure up through the entire RPM range, up towards 60 plus at high RPM. It was fine. Oil pressure was not a concern here. So the short block itself, assembling wise, I did not mess anything up. It was a tuning issue that caused the thing to go lean that broke the piston. That was definitely my fault, which I'll own up to. But in the grand scheme of things, I understand why it happened. I could fix it. It'll be a super easy fix. I can throw the whole thing back together and it'll run, do burnouts again. But there is a very, very important aspect to this entire thing. If we're gonna take the engine out of this thing again and pull it apart, and we have to take the pistons off the rods, these are a press fit rod. Why not spend the extra 300 bucks, get a set of H-beams for it, and then we'll have a wrist pin and we can slide them in and service them if we need to. So there's upgrade number 1. Number 2, I've hated the fact this thing has a flat tappet cam in it. It drives me crazy. Not only that, this cam has been in like 4 engines, and I think it's about time to retire it and maybe put it in something that isn't spinning this high RPM. One of the biggest upgrades that I want to do to this thing is actually spec a proper cam for the motor. And being this thing has had the same flat tappet cam in it the last 3 setups, I think it's time to upgrade to a little bit better cam. So being I like to spin this thing high, we're going to upgrade it to a hydraulic roller cam. It'll be a custom Anderson cam, and we'll be shifting this thing at 7,000, and it'll spin to 7,400 RPM range. And it'll do that safely and make peak power. Peak power and shift point will be 7,000. We'll make sure that does that safely. So while you're in there, might as well upgrade, right? All right, guys, well, I hope you wanted to enjoy today's video. It was a little bit rough for me to kind of see this whole thing unfold. Nevertheless, I kind of priced it out. That video that you guys see that everyone's been reposting, that was about $1,000 video to make on my end. So, but I do it for you guys. I'll break 100 motors every year, make sure I have cool content for you guys, and I learn along the way. So I'm totally fine with this whole process, and I'm willing to learn and adapt from there. The one thing we'll definitely be putting in this truck is an AFR gauge, because if I had one, I would not have broke the motor. So invest in an AFR gauge if you're going to turn more than 6,000 RPM on any setup, or if you just want to drive it and beat on it, put an AFR gauge in the thing. They're not that expensive. Learn from my mistake. I have to pull this motor out and apart because of that. That being said, the F100 is going to come back very soon, so make sure to go ahead and subscribe. So with that being said, I hope you guys are excited to bring the F100 back in the mix. We will get it fixed very quickly, and like I said, before Christmas, this thing will be doing burnouts on the street again with a much better setup. So for the rest of November, we're going to be finishing the bodywork and painting the Galaxy. We are painting it. I said that. I wasn't lying. So you guys are not going to want to miss that. And don't forget, on my website right now, 25% off all existing merchandise, and the brand new tee is live now. Definitely go grab that F100 t-shirt. I do not know when I'll be able to make it again. So grab it now, because we're putting orders in now. We're going to hope and keep our fingers crossed we'll get all this stuff to you guys before Christmas. So with that being said, thank you guys a ton for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next video with the F100. Bye, guys.